So this is not a paid promotion. And before you laugh at me, they only had this flavor in a big container. I tried to look for a small one, but for some reason, this flavor yogurt, which is terrible, comes in a big container. And after 26 years of deliberately staying away from it and hating it, telling myself that I hate it, I am going to sample it. I'm going to have a little bit of it, and I have to finish it because, like I said, it's a huge ass container, and I'm broke. I'm not be wasting food. After 26 years, me and one of my food nemesis is going to find each other in my life again. Yeah. So here goes nothing. Let me just lift it up for you guys. Like I said, please don't laugh. It's not this specific one because obviously this one has cream, but the fruit. It's the fruit flavor of the yogurt flavor that I don't like. So here goes nothing. Hello and welcome to the second episode or the second installment of the Adherence Small Poetry Series. Just to do a recap, the Adherence Poetry Series looks at just literally taking pills and all that entails. If you're someone with a chronic illness and you're having to be taking medication all the time, this is a poetry project that is kind of looking at that in a very literal way, as well as looking at how all the emotions that can get wrapped up in being somebody that has to deliberately choose life through the action of taking pills or through the action of some health, like if you're an asthmatic, an asthma pump, if you're diabetic, insulin. So whatever the case is, it's basically looking at all the emotions that could be very wrapped up into that, because a lot of people who are not chronically ill, I think, have the impression that it's a very easy thing. It's just one pill. What's it gonna do? So without rambling too much, because I did explain it in the first episode, without rambling too much, this is what the Adherence Poetry Project is about. And today, I'm going to be giving the new poem from the series, which will explain why peach yogurt is my food nemesis, or was my food nemesis, because I think I'll be able to finish the container in time, maybe with some breakfast or whatever the case is. And so that poem is gonna explain why I don't like peach yogurt, why I never would like peach yogurt, why I haven't had it for 26 years up until just this moment, and how that, I'm sure you're curious, intersects or has to do with taking pills. So yeah, like the last episode, I'm going to be doing two poems. I'm going to be doing an old poem before I do the new poem. So yeah, I don't want this to be ridiculously long. I think the last episode was very long, mostly because it was the introduction to the series. So this one, I just kind of want to get with it. So the first poem that we're going to be doing is called Hermanus. And if you're not if you are not familiar with Hermanus, it is a place in Cape Town where most people would go and watch the whales. At least that's what it's famous for. You're supposed to go there and watch whales. And it's actually a very sad poem, saddish poem. And I'm realizing that a lot of poetry that I write, especially when it comes to my sickness, is sad poetry, which I think is very understandable, but I don't like that because I'm such an optimistic person and I need to obviously start developing, or I feel like I've developed a very positive relationship with my illness now, but I've yet to write any sort of work or poetry that speaks to that positive relationship. So, mental note, but yeah, Hermanus is a saddish poem, and it was actually a very difficult poem to write, not in the sense of coming up with the words, but the truth-telling of the poem. It's a type of poem where it could bring judgment to my family, which is totally not the intention of the poem. I think the intention of the poem was it was a memory that was just very, very hard for me. I kind of had to get it out on paper. And I don't want to do too much over explanation, and I don't want to feel like I'm retracting what I did write in the poem. But what I feel should be on top of everybody's head in terms of this poem is that it's more a poem about fear. Fear in the family around illness and sickness, and sort of like our very knee-jerk reactions that people have towards certain illnesses, or people that are ill in their families, even people that love you the most, right? And I'm going to start speaking a bit more specifically, because I feel like I'm meandering all around the point. Even people that love you the most and people that you love the most, when having to confront a disease such as HIV, there is a lot of fear there, and fear begets some very hurtful things. And I think that is what the poem looks like. It's not a judgment on my family, but it's more looking around the fear and also the context, because it was a terrible context for my family. So both Hermanus and the new poem that I'm going to do are set in a context where I had just moved from Zimbabwe. I was living with my grandmother, and I moved to South Africa to live with my parents and my little brother. So that was a new thing for me. Being in a new country, that was a new thing for me. A new school, that was a new thing for me. And on top of that, our family was not doing well financially. Obviously, with the move, there's like shaky ground. You kind of just, it wasn't like hit the ground running type of situation. So there was a lot of like financial turmoil. So it's in that context that both poems are written in, but specifically Hermanus will look at the financial thing about it, and Peach Yogurt will look at sort of very much my personal difficulty with that move and all that unfamiliarity. So I think let's just get into it. Right. Of course, I'm reading again. I'm so sorry. I said I was going to practice. I lied. So here we go. Hermanus. Let me actually do this. Okay. Hermanus. It wasn't a good year for the family. It was the worst year for me. Christmas came, or maybe it was Easter. Christian commemoration consumed in capitalism. What was supposedly faith-based required finances. So his trip was scrummaged for the sake of us children. Food was salvaged from a fridge that was hungry itself. Mother packed lunchboxes of some roasted chicken. A few bottles of juice were set aside. There was to be no restaurant outing, as in previous years. There was to be a romanticizing of the little we had, a guise of family time and communal hospitality, a gratefulness that at the very least, going to the beach was free. God's great greens, winding Western Cape roads, we drove to Hermanus to watch whales we never saw. We stopped for lunch. We watched the waves instead. We ate our packed chicken. I'm thinking it must have been Easter. A last lunch of sorts. A cup was passed to my mom, to my dad, to my brother. And I too wanted juice. True to our scarcity, it was only the one cup that was packed. The absence of another shattering the guise. Conflicting communalism. Hesitantly, the juice is poured for me, and a comment is passed along with it. Knowing your condition, Kundai, you should have bought your own cup. It wasn't a good year for the family. It was the worst year for me. I think it's self-explanatory. It's a story, obviously, and it's looking at this idea of there was one cup. I was the HIV positive person in the family, and there was like a why didn't you bring your own cup type of situation, and obviously it very much hurt me. And I say it was a knee-jerk reaction because nowadays we just be drinking from the same cup all the time, you know. But yeah, something I had to get down on paper. I don't think I want to over-explain that one too much. What I will say is I actually really like how I wrote this poem. It had like my favorite poetic device, which is alliteration. I love alliteration. Sometimes to my own detriment or to the detriment of my poems. I just love this part where I say, God's great greens, winding western Cape roads we drove. The alliteration there. So yeah, I like how I wrote that poem, and it was a hurtful poem to write. So we still have time. Let's go. This one is called Peach Yogurt, and it's the newest one of the Adherence small series. It's the new poem, the one that this episode was made for. So yeah, let me just go with it, and hopefully I read it perfectly so I don't have to do a double read. Peach yogurt. Health did not seem to agree with me, like peach yogurt. My body had been starved of good for so long, it could no longer decipher nutrients. It could no longer digest food. Unsick was unfamiliar, like peach yogurt. I was 12, and I thought I knew enough, but I realized I knew very little. I only knew of dairy delights stuffed in freezer packets from the OK supermarket. I only knew of a home city that could fit 5 times into Cape Town. I was the V&A waterfront, nauseated and overwhelmed, stomach grumbling to the music and musica, acid bubbling up chunks of peach and pills. My life then precariously lived piece by piece. Foreign land, foreign flavor. What of strawberry? What of banana? What was this ARV flavored peach dairy reaching up my throats, regurgitated all over the carpet, amongst the white people, upon the polytones, black mambazo and freshly ground? I'm sorry, I say, ignorant of the illness inside me, disgusted by the means to treat it, like I will always be disgusted by peach yogurt. So yeah, another very self-explanatory storytelling type of poem. It basically tells the story of, we were going to go to the V&A waterfront, and back then I used to have to take my pills 3 times a day, and I took my pills with peach yogurt. And what subsequently happened was I vomited all over Musica. If you remember Musica at V&A waterfront, it was huge, and I just vomited all over the place. And from then on, I hated peach yogurt. I was also incredibly sick. I was super sick at the time, and basically, yeah, like I just could not hold down anything, even the medication. And I think my parents had tried to like give me the medication with something that would taste nice, peach yogurt, and from then on, I just started hating it. Yeah. And this was also written at a time before my parents had told me. I was so sick that my parents obviously decided to tell me that what the illness was. But this was before I knew what the illness was. So it really, if I have to summarize like those 2 years in Cape Town, there was just kind of like end it off on a bad note. Just to end it off on a bad note. Those 2 years in Cape Town, moving from Zim and having those 2 years in Cape Town, were the worst 2 years of my life to date. You know, I'm going through a very, very bad patch right now in my life, but to date, those 2 years in Cape Town were the worst of my life. There was just so much new. There was a new country, new people, new family, it almost felt like. There was just so much news. They told me about my status. It was very, very overwhelming. And maybe one day I'll give like a testimony. We'll see. I don't like sad stories. Like I said, I'm a very optimistic person, but the facts are the facts, and it wasn't a great time. Also, I was being bullied at the school that I was at, so it really was the worst year for me, like I said in Hermanus, but we overcame, we went through, and yeah. And on that note, I will say, you came, you saw, conquer.